G'day and welcome back, everybody. It's John here from Hunterwood, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce a friend and a colleague and a client of a wonderful business called Microburbs, who is an outstanding Australian business that's revolutionizing the way property should be purchased. And what I mean by that is by using the intelligent use of data. And data is something that most Australians are encouraged to pursue and not use someone's opinion, including my opinion. So, Luke, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, John.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, Luke, you know I'm a massive fan of your team and the work and output that you do. And what I'm hoping that we can do today is really talk about some pretty serious stuff, which is the difference between good data and bad data. So what I'd like to do is just ask you 5 simple questions that might help the viewers understand what's really good data and what's bad data at the end of the day.
Yes, absolutely. When people come to Microburbs, like every other site, you always wonder, like, to what degree can I trust it? How have they made this? Do they have a rigorous process? Otherwise, if the data is not trustable, then how can I act on it?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's some players out there that mean well, and they think they're providing good data, and they're good people. But unfortunately, when you scratch the surface, it's not going to give you the edge that you're looking for. So, Luke, in your case with Microburbs, what methods do you use to source data and verify your property data?
Yeah, so property data we have on an individual listing level. So we go out to many major sources on the web, and then we combine them together. So we check them against one another. So sometimes you'll have different sources making different claims. So for example, you might have the agent site not give as much information as an aggregator site. So we work hard to have all of these algorithms to bring it together to become a source of truth on an individual property level. And then out of that, because we know about all the individual properties, we even know when listings get updated. So for example, if they change the price, we know about that as well because we're hitting up these sites daily. So what this means is that we can have confidence when we build our indicators like median prices and forecasts on top of that. So we can always go back to the base data, whereas there's a lot of players out there that are just using median prices from CoreLogic, where CoreLogic has done the work and they don't really know what's inside. They can't. We can always break things down to more localized levels, and this gives us a stronger ability to be more confident in what data we put out.
Yeah, awesome. So you're using the algorithms to collect data, and it's a massive collection sources of different places and data inputs. Is that what I'm hearing as well?
Yeah, so beyond listings, we have a whole lot of other context. So points of interest, demographics, finances, geography. We're trying to bring in together any kind of data set that might influence capital growth or livability, tenant turnover rate, yield, all of that sort of stuff. So we can also check against, so we're not completely reliant on the ad that the real estate agent puts out. Right. We know about the area from objective sources, like from government sources, so that there's just many layers of checking of the veracity of the data.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, so moving on, how frequently does Microburbs update the data? And what's the process for ensuring it reflects the most current information?
So on the back end, we are collecting new properties every single day. So every day we have a job that runs and it brings all of these properties together. And so that daily update allows us to have our property finder tool where you can search for properties that are currently on the market. And then weekly, we are bringing those together, aggregating those to create median prices, days on market, and all these other important real estate indicators. So having those weekly gives you an edge over existing players that are putting them out monthly, because sometimes markets will move much faster than over the course of a month.
Look, if you at the time of recording, Perth is just going gangbusters, and weekly is so much better than monthly, because in a month, prices can jump 10, 20, 30, and even $40,000. So yeah, weekly is great. And also, can you provide any examples of how your data has been validated or cross-referenced with other reputable sources?
Yeah, so reputable sources, so there's different kinds. Some will be our primary source. So there will be just government sources. So there's a question of checking that we got the data correctly from them. So we don't run our own census, for example. And then in terms of real estate sources, so if you think about more our competitors, so other people that are providing median prices and forecasts and other stuff. So it's not like we want to just copy them. So we will have a customer say to us, look, we think that your median price is wrong, and we think that, REA's price is more realistic. And then we'll go in and look at the recent transactions, because we have those, and say, actually, it's more the properties on the high side of the market, the top end of the market. So it's not really still actually reflective of the median price. So so from that point of view, we're not just out to copy other reputable. So there's a lot of time where we'll simply say, look, we don't think that source is right, but we're always happy to get these reports. So no claims that our data is perfect. So there will be times where we look at it and we go, look, CoreLogic's saying this. How did we come up with that figure? That is quite out there. So we do have a process of constantly updating, trouble tickets. And also we have automated scanning. So when new outliers come out, our developers get notified of that. So you can have a suburb that suddenly jumped, and it's like, could that really be the case? So we have to throw often manual labor on these things to ensure that this really is a trend and it's not some quirk in the data.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about measures that you've got in place to handle these sorts of discrepancies or errors in the data. So one of them is, if there's an outlier, you'll get some manual labor to look at this. The second part is that you'll look at outliers. You step in and tell me how we handle any discrepancies. And do you communicate that with clients if there is a discrepancy there?
We get it and correct it as soon as possible. Definitely the person who reports the problem. So we like to get back to them. So sometimes, usually we'll get back to them and say, look, this is how we do it, and we're confident in the way that we do it. Maybe the competitor has a different kind of approach. But so usually the priority is just get it up to date as soon as possible. Okay. Make sure that it is reliable. There are also times where we just say, look, this suburb is too small, or this street is too small, and we just don't have the confidence to speak about that street anymore. So we'll take it out.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk about the last point here, is the limitations of your data. Is there, no company is perfect, right? And certainly mine it's not perfect, but are there any limitations or gaps that clients should be aware of, perhaps with your?
So taking real estate data, for example. So we are reliant on what we can see on the web. So a property sells and it's not updated on the web, then we don't know about it. Usually if a property sells off market, we don't know about it. So we're going by what we can find. So that would be the main one. And obviously also there is just certain things in real estate that aren't being tracked. Sometimes, very often, it'll show up in things like turnover rate. So perhaps there's just a particularly troublesome neighbor who is leading people to keep on buying and selling over and over again, just churning through the property. So there are still ways in which it will show up, that shows up in our data. But yes, we don't know everything. So we don't know, it doesn't replace a built-in pest inspection. I mean, we can tell you that you're close to the bush, but we can't tell you that you have termites, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's common sense. Yeah. So thank you for being honest with the limitations. And, back to your off-market limitations, I mean, that would represent a small portion of Australian sales.
So we do get some Valuer General data that has those in there, even if there wasn't a listing. So another thing to note is that the off-market transactions might not be entirely market transactions. So if there's a context of a divorce or a property is being sold to a child or something, then the pricing might not be the same as if it was an open market, in which case you may be a little bit led astray. So there is a bit of a difference in price between the on and off market.
Yeah. I think properties. You're talking about stuff that's probably not statistically significant. I mean, a father selling their property to their daughter one-off and there's 1,000 sales in that suburb. It's, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like it's statistically significant.
I have analyzed this. It's more than 1 in 1,000, definitely. So there definitely are a reasonable number of transactions that don't get listed. But yes, it wouldn't be enough to, given also the complexities of what else is in that transaction, like why did they not put it on open market? Because usually it's very much in the interest of the seller to get as many buyers as possible. Given the complexities of that, I don't think it influences median prices that much.
Yeah. I like to think that too. Look, if it's not too much trouble, just one more question. Hedonic pricing and data, Right. Can you please explain that to the viewers? Why it's important to understand hedonic pricing or hedonic data? Correct me if I'm using the wrong term. And what does it mean to people when they buy reports from you or any other competitor?
Yeah, so different kinds. There are two issues with the real estate market, why you can't simply rely on raw sales. So why you can't just look at 10 sales from back in 2016 and 10 sales today and go, oh yeah, that was the change. There's two things. One is that different kinds of properties sell at different times. So in generally most markets, low-end properties will sell, but it's really the boom markets where you have the high-end properties sell. That's one of many patterns that's going on. So the kind of property that's on the market isn't representative of the overall market. So what you need to do is adjust for that. So you need to say, okay, does this affect the typical property as opposed to looking at what is the price of the typical property that's on the market right now? So that, yeah, we often have times where people complain that our price is off, and then we'll look at it and go, they'll say, look at the competitor, that it's gone up massively. And then we look at it and it's like, well, it's really the high end of the suburb that's been selling lately. Yeah, it's the beautiful homes by the water. It's not your typical property, so we stand by our median price. But the other problem that's even less talked about is that the amount of investment in the building changes over time. So particularly when you're looking over long periods of time, over 10 years, a typical building might change massively. So you can have an inner city suburb like Balmain, where in the 80s, you might have the housing stock not worth very much. It's just very much just enough to have renters in. And then in come all these high-end professional people, and they need Smeg and Miele. They need the beautiful bathtubs and massive investment per square meter. So you can have a transformation of the suburb on the building level, but that's not something that you would have benefited from as an investor if your goal was to just get in and buy and rent the place out. So if most investors, they'll just look at like, okay, I'm going to pay this much, and then I've got to pay this much in maintenance for the building. They're not factoring in that they have to keep up with the Joneses in terms of the building itself. So very often, and I should say, the building is about 30 to 50% of the value of the property, when what you really want as an investor is growth in land. And I can tell you, having built forecasting models, when the forecasting model is looking for real outlier, like massive growth, not just middling growth, it can be easy just to hone in on suburbs that are having a building boom, where suddenly it's becoming very trendy to have more expensive buildings, but that's not real growth. Yeah. So you have new builds coming in, knockdowns, and you can have a situation where you've got land value has barely moved over 10 years, but now there are McMansions that have come in. Yeah. Usually there is a relationship between the two. So there is a certain amount of capitalization which people will put into the building, but it's not smooth. So you can be really misled by long-term growth. So you can have from the majors, you can go to CoreLogic and look at the median price. This was it in 2016. This is it in 2024. And it could be right for each of those times, but you're not comparing apples with apples. Yeah. So you might be comparing back in, 20 years ago, they might have been like 1970s homes. But now it's actually the median. So that means over 50% of the housing stock are actually now McMansions. Yeah. So that's a very different kind of suburb. That's a very different thing. And so that growth that you see there is highly misleading.
That is an excellent explanation, Luke, because most people forget that you have to compare like with like. And using your example of Balmain, that was a working class suburb, and it's become expensive for a whole bunch of reasons, but mainly because yuppies like me who wanted the macchiato, the wankers like me that wanted the macchiato instead of the beer, or if they want beer, it's boutique beer. They've gone in there and they put the Italian taps and this and stuff in there. So the houses are now really expensive anyway, and there may have been no growth.
That's right.
So that's such a great thing.
That's right. Yeah. So
maybe
be very careful about gentrification. Is it just luxury?
Yeah.
How much of the increase in the value is just luxury items that are going to depreciate heavily on you? So even if you go to the effort of doing a renovation, that's just going to be worth less and less every year. what you really got to keep an eye on is the land.
Yep.
So what we do at Microburbs is we're obsessed with looking at individual properties that are bought and sold that aren't renovated. So if we're really fascinated by the houses that don't change that much. So they don't add bedrooms and bathrooms. They don't have a DA. What do they do? What's the capital growth there? Because that's much more reflective of the investor experience.
Yeah, well said. And I really wish there was a movement out there that really explained that and to everyday Australians, because it was certainly new to me, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. I never thought of data like that. I think intrinsically you might have a little bit of an intuition towards it, but the way you've explained it helped us understand that, hey, if it was a fibro shack back in the day, you want to see what that fibro shack is worth today with no renovations, as an example.
Well put.
Yeah. All right. Well, viewers, I hope you've all enjoyed the wonderful Luke, great Australian who's revolutionizing data in Australia. If people want to get in contact with you or have a look at the type of report you purchase.
Yeah, microburbs.com.au. Check it out. You can check out our socials, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you can also I'm always happy to talk. I love talking to investors. So you can also drop me a line at luke@microburbs.com.au.
Awesome. All right, Luke, thanks very much, mate. And we'll see you in the next podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.